Hi everyone, today we are talking about functions and how we evaluate them. As a reminder, you do not need to write down everything we cover in this video, but be sure to jot down important information and at least one example of each type of problem that we'll cover. Remember that you can also pause to jot down important notes, rewind to view information again, and fast forward if you think you already got it. Just be careful and make sure you don't fast forward too much so that you miss out on something important. Let's get started. So first of all, we need to find out what a function even is. A function is a relationship between two sets of variables. And certain things have to happen in order to make it a function. You have to have an input and an output, and you have to have what's called a predictable relationship. That's when only one unique output is assigned to each input. If you haven't done so yet, pause the video and make sure that this important information is written down. So let's talk about what this means. When we talk about an input and an output, in math, the input is the variable x. So it's the variable x in a function that's going to create an output based on the function rule. If that doesn't make sense right now, that's okay, we're going to go over it. But in math, the input is x. Sometimes it's also called the domain. So that's just another vocabulary word that people can use instead of x or input. It's called domain. Make sure you have this information down before moving on. We're going to talk about output next. So output is the opposite. So that's the variable y in a function whose value depends on the input and how it's going to be calculated by the function rule. So y is also a name for the output. We also call it f of x, or the function of x, because it can't function without your input, your x. So that's where that word function comes from. They rely on each other. And instead of domain, we call it range. Be sure to have this down in your notes before moving on. So if we were to think about the function like a machine, we would see that there's an input. So this function machine is like one of those coin machines. You put in money and then it gives you a souvenir coin. The input would be your x or domain, and it would be the 1 cent, the penny that you put into the machine. The machine has its own function. So it's going to have basically a set of rules, and it's going to take that input and do something with it. And out's going to pop out an output. For the coin machine, it takes the penny as the input, does its thing, presses it, uses the design, and then it's going to output with a souvenir coin. In math, we're not going to put an actual object into our machine. In math, our input is a value. So for this function machine, I'm going to put in the value x equals 2 into the machine. This math function machine is going to have what looks like an equation. So it says f of x, we know that's the same thing as y, is equal to x plus 3. When the input is 2, instead of x, I'm substituting the x for 2. So instead of x plus 3, I get 2 plus 3. So then my output, my function of x, is equal to 5. And remember, we also call the output y and range. So it's really just looking at your equations as if they're machines. And in this case, x is the input and y is the output. So it might look like another equation to you. But be careful, not all equations are functions. So far, what you're learning in 8th grade math, that's true. However, there could be equations that aren't actually functions. Remember, in order to make it a function, it needs to have only one unique output assigned to each input. So what that means is when I put in x equals 2, there's only one possible answer, 5. There are some equations that are not functions because you can put in one value in as the input, and sometimes you get one answer as your output and other times you get another. So it's not predictable. So not all equations are functions. Functions are only equations that give you one unique output when you put in one input. Because that's how machines function. You have to be able to predict. If I put in a coin sometimes, and I sometimes get out a souvenir coin, other times I get out a piece of paper, then it's not functioning. It's not being predictable. So it's very important that you only get one output each time. That's how it makes it a function. For your assignments today, they're going to be asking you to evaluate functions. So that's important for us to pause and think about what the word evaluate means. Evaluate just means to calculate the value of the function. And usually when we say the value of the function, we're talking about the output. That's the value of it. So be sure you pause the video and jot down this information. Let's take a look at some examples. In this example, they want you to find the output k when the input t is -7. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can try it on your own first. Okay, so they're telling us right now that the input is t, and then the k, the output k, is the output. So that means in this machine, I'm putting in the t value. I'm doing all this mumbo jumbo stuff to figure out the function, and then out's going to pop my k. So that tells me that the t value is going to be substituted in right there. And they told us that t is equal to -7. So instead of k equals 10t minus 19, on your paper you should have written down k equals 10 times -7 minus 19, because 10t is really a multiplication between those two. So now I'm going to calculate this. K is going to equal to this multiplication, subtracting 19. So 10 times -7 is -70. So -70 subtracting 19 is going to get you -89. So K, the output is going to be -89 when you put in the input of -7. That's what the machine is going to spit out when you put in -7. Okay, so it's basically just substituting the input into the function. The function, which looks like an equation, but we know we're calling it a function now because we know for sure there's only going to be one answer. Let's try another example. Go ahead and pause this video and try it out on your own first. All right, so in this situation, the output is B and the input is A. So here's my function. My input is A. It's going to pop out with my B. The function is B equals -1 minus 7A. The input is 6, and we have no idea what the output is. So you should have written down in your notes B equals -1 minus 7A, which changes into a 6 for the A instead. That's what the function is going to be churning up and trying to spit out an output. And this is -7 times 6, multiplication, which is -42. So that'll give us -43. It's going to churn out -43 as its one and only output because it is a function. So it's going to function and only give you one answer. It's not going to be a surprise every time. There we go. Okay, The next type of question that these exercises could ask you is to evaluate a function from its graph. So it may look kind of scary, but just know that input and output are x and y. So the x is the input and the y is the output. Knowing that is very important for this problem. Go ahead and pause the video and try it on your own first. Okay, so we have to find the output y when the input x is -5. So basically they're saying they want to find the x and y point. They're giving us the x as -5. So all we have to do here is just look up where the x and y meet at that point. Remember, x is going this way, left to right. So we have to find -5 on this axis. -5 is going to be right here. That's where x is equal to -5. And then all I'm going to do is look up and see where that x equals -5 is going to meet up with the y. It's at this point. So it's going to meet up with y right here at y equals 7. So this point right here is -5 for the x and 7 for the y. So 7 is our answer. Actually not that bad, right? It's really just organized differently. But as long as you remember that your input is x, then you'll find your output really easily on the other axis. So this is used a lot in business because the x-axis is usually used by business people to look up like the years that they've worked or the amount of items that they've sold to now match it up with the profit that they have. So input this many items sold, output my calculation for profit. Okay, so that it's just organized a little differently. Let's try one last one. Go ahead and pause the video and try this one on your own. All right, so again, this is my input and this is my output, x and y. So the input is 4, so that's going to be found on my x-axis right here. That's my x equals 4, and it looks like it hits the line at this point where y equals 1. So when I input 4, I'm going to get an output of 1. You should have gotten 1. Okay, so that's evaluating functions. Let me know if you have any questions as you work on these exercises, and I'll see you in class.